Next question. What about church discipline? How do you handle sin? And I know we touched on rebelliousness, which was kind of handled in a different way earlier, a couple questions back, but why don't we take a case of obvious sin?
Well, the desire would certainly to be to restore that person with meekness. There will be some that are confirmed sinners. They've just chosen to live in sin. They refuse to do otherwise. They're going to have it their own way. The Scriptures are pretty clear about that. Warn a factious person once, a second time, then have nothing to do with them. If you've brought this to their knowledge, that was Titus 3:10. If you brought this to their knowledge, 1 Corinthians 5, and they won't turn from it, in fact, they're cocky about it, they continue in sin, they're not going to budge, then in the presence of witnesses, turn them over to Satan to be taught not to blaspheme. Don't eat with them, don't associate with them, expel them from your midst. I mean, those are serious things, but the purpose of that is for redemption. And again, without relationship, all this stuff's crazy. It doesn't even make any sense. Most churches will never do what Jesus said in Matthew 18. Go to Him and Him alone. If He still won't hear you, bring 2 or 3 witnesses. If they still won't hear you, then tell the church. If they still won't hear you, then don't eat with them, don't associate with them, expel them from your midst. Most people won't touch that because of potential legal problems, or, well, we're all sinners saved by grace, and so we're going to disobey Jesus and rack up even more sins by disobeying what He told us to do in Matthew 18 and 1 Corinthians 5. You know, it's like it's all confusing. And again, the reason why it's confusing is because when you say, work out Matthew 18 in a normal institutional environment, it's legalism. More than likely, the 2 or 3 witnesses either don't care, or they can't be found, or they have worse sin in their own life, or some other kind of thing. And it's like it's all just like running in the sand, because the foundation is sand, not putting into practice His Word, but rather a common belief system, a common style of worship that we all like. The pastor preaches real good, the building's near my home. It's all built on faulty foundations, on sand. Well, then when you try to do something God said, it's quicksand. You sink in it. In Matthew 18, it doesn't say, if he still won't hear you, tell the elders who will execute discipline. It says, if he still won't hear you, bring 2 or 3 witnesses, and then tell the church. It doesn't say anything about going and telling the elders, per se. You know what I mean? It's like we've this excommunication, institutional version of Matthew 18 and 1 Corinthians 5 has been pretty much abandoned because it doesn't work. The reason it doesn't work is because there are no relationships in the vast majority of churches.
People don't even eat with each other.
They don't eat with each other anyway. In fact, I had a guy tell me, a mega church maybe 2 hours north of here, he said, if you said to me I wouldn't eat with you, I would laugh if you were part of my church, because I live next door to one of the leaders of the church, and he's never been in my home in all the years that we've lived in these trailers side by side, and I've never been in his home. We've never eaten with each other, so it'd be a joke to me. But that's really the point, is in 2 Corinthians 2, the man who they refused to eat with in 1 Corinthians 5, in obedience to what Paul had said to them, it says, run back to him. We're not ignorant of Satan's devices. You're going to kill this guy. You had such deep fellowship with him that in not eating with him, he's going to die of remorse if you don't rush back to him now that he's repented. See, they had deep relationship in Corinth that most places today do not have. And therefore, what Paul wrote makes sense. What Jesus wrote makes sense. Because this isn't a church discipline thing. Go to Him and Him alone, then bring 2 or 3 witnesses and tell the church. This isn't a map for browbeating someone or excommunicating him. This is Jesus' guideline for bringing his life into a situation. He goes on to say, and he's not talking about worship services. He said, where 2 or 3 are in my name, there I am. See, the context is that if you'll do it my way, I'll show up to redeem this man. I'll find a way to turn 1 Corinthians 5 tragedy into 2 Corinthians 2 and 2 Corinthians 7 victory. See, if you'll do it my way, I'll show up to help you. And that's the whole purpose of these things, is to redeem people. Now, if they don't love the truth, if they're factious and don't want anything to do with the truth, then there's not much we can really do for them. But we know this much, and we've got to see to it that no bitter root grows up among us, defiling many. A little leaven leavens the whole batch. If there's one person in our midst, just like Israel had one man, Achan, in their midst that had an idol in his tent, And that man was sufficient for the whole nation to be defeated in the battle. They just won Jericho, which was impossible, and they just got defeated then. And in the very next battle, which was an easy one, they didn't even need to take all their men, they didn't think. But they got wiped out because there was a man with an idol in his tent, not because they weren't skilled in war. And the same is true with us. 1 Corinthians 5, that's also a New Testament principle. Those things were written for our learning, the New Testament says, of the Old Testament. But if we won't be like Phineas and go to the man, the Israelite, that's bringing sin into the camp and drive a spear through it, if we're not willing to deal with that, it won't be credited to us as righteousness as it was to Phineas. And the leaven will leaven the whole batch, and our best efforts will be ruined by the leaven, the yeast that works its way through the whole batch.